Okay guys, today I'm gonna do something a little different, Gonna do a little tour, but it's gonna be around a specific topic. Today I'm in Boerum Hill to tell you guys the story about the Mohawk Nation members who used to live in this neighborhood and built the skyscrapers that we all know and love. It's a very interesting story. I'm gonna show you a couple of sites pertaining to it and tell you all that. Before we start, Cam, how are you?
I'm ready for the knowledge.
I'm sure you're ready for the knowledge. We all are. That's what everyone's watching this for. Guys, before we start, check out the Patreon. Huge help. That's how I fund these things. I think I say the same thing every video, but you know what I mean. There's extras on there, all that. Also like and subscribe, get out of the way now. And I don't know, hang in there because we're gonna cover a cool story of the Mohawk Native Americans who lived here in Boerum Hill. This is a cool one, so let's get started. All right, so here at this first stop, this is 375 State Street. This is where a lot of the Mohawk Native Americans lived in this area of Boerum Hill, which was known as Little Caughnawaga. So Caughnawaga was the reservation where a lot of the Mohawks were coming from. It's about like 7,000 people, 12,000 acres, which is not huge. That's less than half the size of Disney, which I think is an official unit of measurement. Now the Mohawks are a nation under the Confederacy of the Iroquois. So the Iroquois is made up of 6 nations and the Mohawks are one of them. Confederacy, not that kind of confederacy, but a confederacy of 6 different nations. So 6 generations of Mohawk Native Americans have come and worked in the iron work of New York City. They're responsible for just about every major skyscraper or bridge project of the 20th century. Things like the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center, the Chrysler Building, the Verrazano Bridge, the Hellgate Bridge. They've had their hand in almost all of them. Pretty impressive. And this here, like I said, is where a lot of them lived. Now, they got started in ironwork almost by chance. In 1886, the Dominion Bridge Company, a major Canadian company, was building a bridge over the St. Lawrence River that passed through the Caughnawaga Reservation. As part of that construction, they agreed to employ the Mohawks that lived on the reservation. They were only trying to employ them in the easier work, like carrying stuff and all that. But they found that after work hours, they were hanging out on the bridge and just like walking around and walking on these suspended trusses over the river like they didn't care. They're like, wow, these guys would be pretty good, doing some of the actual iron work and whatnot. So they trained a few of them and they found that they took to it. That was in 1886. By 1907, there were 70 trained doing this. And in fact, a very sad thing happened. There was in 1907, a bridge collapsed. The Quebec Bridge collapsed. It was a project they were building, and around 35 Mohawks died in that accident. So from there, they decided, you know what, we can't centralize in one project, especially nearby. We got to go out and do all our own things. So we're not so susceptible to accidents like this. So in 1915, they say a man named John Diabo came here to New York City to work on the Hellgate Bridge, and he kind of paved the way for a lot of them later to come, and they came here to Boerum Hill. But this was where a lot of them lived. In fact, the whole building was Mohawks, and because it was a 12-hour drive from the reservation, a lot of them brought the women and children here as well, so it kind of created a community. They left their doors unlocked in there because they all knew each other. Leaving your doors unlocked in buildings in New York is the equivalent of standing on a bridge hundreds of feet above a river. It's probably more dangerous, frankly. The last Mohawk actually moved out of this building in 1997, sadly. And there still are Mohawks. In fact, 10% of the ironworkers today are still Mohawk, but they live in different parts of the city. There's some in Sunset Park, there's some in different areas. But yeah, no longer in one building and one neighborhood like this. But there's still their spots to talk about, so let's keep it moving. All right, so this neighborhood was known as downtown Caughnawaga because of all of the different Mohawks that made their home here as an homage to the reservation back in Canada. But I'm actually standing in front of what was one of the important establishments in the neighborhood. This was called the Nevan Street Bar and Grill, but then in the 1950s was bought and turned into the Wigwam. That was the name of the bar because it was pretty much catered to the Mohawks in the neighborhood. They actually had a sign on the door that said, "The greatest iron workers in the world pass through these doors." Which is a much cooler sign than what most bars have, which is like, save water, drink beer or something. But this is where they would come. They would leave keys here. Some people would get their mail here. People would get rides back to the reservation from here. This is a very important part of the neighborhood. Joseph Mitchell, in his famous essay, Mohawks and High Steel, wrote about this place. In that essay, he talked about Caughnawaga, which was like the boiled bread that the Mohawks would make, and it was like one of their big dishes. And they actually started carrying the cornmeal and the oats that they needed to make that bread in the supermarkets here because so many people were making it. Now, this neighborhood hit its high point in the 1950s when about 800 different Mohawks lived here, women and children as well, because they were basically just staying put. But that's pretty cool. So that just gives you an idea how many Mohawks were represented. About 15% of ironworkers back then were Mohawk Indians. So that's pretty interesting. Today it's a little bit lower, it's like 10%, but that's still a good amount. They're just not as concentrated here in this area of Borum Hill. This was the largest Mohawk community outside of the reservation in the world. And they started here because of the location, it used to be here on Atlantic, of the Local 361, which was the ironworkers union that they all pertained to. So they needed to get jobs, they needed to meet people, all that stuff. It was right there. It has since moved to Jamaica, Queens, but it used to be there, which is kind of interesting. And the famous photo, lunch atop a skyscraper, Cam, where everyone's sitting on the thing? Yeah. Well, 3 of those construction workers sitting on that beam above 30 Rock, which is where the picture was taken by Charles Ebbets, were Mohawk Indians. Pretty interesting, huh? Pretty cool. Bet you didn't know that, did you, Cam? I know you didn't. But that's a cool, if you guys don't know the picture I'm talking about, all the guys eating lunch on the beam, black and white. If you don't know that picture, just walk into any dorm room in the country. It'll be right next to the Scarface poster and the Bob Marley made of little Bob Marleys. So yeah, this is a former site of the Wigwam, 75 Nevan Street. It's not there anymore, but neither is a lot of stuff in New York, but you gotta point it out. Let's keep moving. And because you had a community here, you had organizations that catered to that community. I'm standing in front of 360 Pacific Street, which was the site of the Kyler Presbyterian Church, where the pastor, his name was Dr. David Monroe Corey, would work. And he learned the Mohawk Oneida language and actually translated the book of Luke into it. He wrote a hymnal to make them more comfortable, was able to speak with them. He actually learned it from them and catered to that community as well. He wrote his own book about it as well. So they would have a powwow every year, which, by the way, some people thought was blasphemous. But some extremists, there are Christians who think that, Harry Potter is blasphemous. So can't please everyone. But they still did. They wanted to create a place for the community to feel safe and accepted, and it really was kind of a linchpin. So in addition to the bar, in addition to the different apartment buildings that housed a lot of Mohawks, they had their church, huh? It was such an important part of the community that back on the reservation in Caughnawaga, they referred to it as the church that makes friends. That was actually what they translated the word they called it, huh? Now, as the 70s came around, the amount of Mohawks in the neighborhood started to decrease because there was actually a thruway built and a highway built to the reservation that cut the travel time in half, basically taking away the need to plant more roots here in this area. So people would just travel, and there's still Mohawks in the iron industry here, but it's a little bit less. So there were numbers from the union that had them about 10%, whereas before it was over 15%, and they just don't live in the same area like they used to in Little Caughnawaga. This here, by the way, today is private residence. Yeah, pretty nice, pretty fancy. You can see that big window up there, probably looks into study or something, I don't know. Maybe just a social media room or something, I don't know. The guy who lives there is probably the guy who's out in front on his phone being like, buy, sell, So, yeah, private residence. Very fancy, not for nothing. And also the Thunderbird Indian dancers originated here as well. They still travel around, do different events in New York City area, New York area, and the Northeast. And they say they originated here with the different events and groups that made their home here. But yeah, this is the former site of Kyler Presbyterian Church. What'd you think of that, Cam? Pretty cool, huh?
It was almost too cool.
That's not true. Don't say that. That's bad. No such thing as being too cool. Believe me, I know from experience. Okay, well, I hope you guys liked it, guys. We had ourselves a time. You liked it? Like and subscribe. Check out the Patreon. A lot of extras on there, of course. And you know, at the very least, tell a friend, huh? Send the old hyperlink, as the kids do sometimes, or not. We covered the Mohawk story. We covered how they got here, how they've left recently. I showed you a few of the little neighborhood haunts and former haunts, but super interesting, man. I don't know what to tell you. That's pretty much it. Pretty quick video. What do you think, Cam? Should we go have some Caughnawaga?
Sounds good.
All right. See y'all later.